Christianity ended in 70 AD, part 3. So we see Abraham was circumcising. That was the covenant between him and God, cutting off where that fallen seed had come from. This is a show that they are sinners and they need to be redeemed, that the very seed that they produce children with is fallen. Now Abraham had Isaac, a promised child, born after menopause. He went to sacrifice Isaac. That was a show of Jesus Christ. It would take a sacrificial promised child to relieve them from their sin, because sacrifices were there for sin. That's why they sacrificed. Isaac is a show of John the Baptist. John the Baptist was born after menopause and came before Jesus Christ. Isaac was born after menopause and came before Jacob. Jacob was renamed Israel and had the 12 tribes of Israel. Jesus Christ became the new Israel and had 12 apostles to judge the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob was the beginning, or Abraham, Jacob, Isaac were the beginning of the 12 tribes of Israel. Jesus Christ was the end of the 12 tribes of Israel. They were the prophets prophesying it. He was the fulfillment fulfilling it. Whenever God called Abraham, he let Abraham know that his seed would be in bondage for 400 years. One of their brothers, one of the 12 tribes, one of the 12 patriarchs' fathers, was sold into Egypt by the other brothers, and because of that they went into bondage for 400 years. And then one like Joseph, Moses, had to come and deliver them from Egypt, because God does everything perfectly. Again, Jesus was Israel. That's why it said in Matthew that the scripture says, I called my son out of Egypt. Jesus was chased into Egypt and then he came back. Because in the Old Testament, whenever he said, I called my son out of Egypt, he was talking about Jacob, or Israel, the children of Israel. God does everything perfectly. Joseph flourished in Egypt, and he wound up being the one that the rest of the tribes had to come to for their salvation. So then God called Moses, and he became great in Egypt, and he was the one that delivered the children of Israel. And then Moses brought them the Old Testament, giving them the Passover. He delivered them. He had the Passover, and 50 days later he gave them the law. So he sprinkled them with the blood of animals, with hyssop, and sprinkled the letters of the law and all the people, and enjoined them to the law of that first testament. As Paul said, what was the law for? He said it was added because of transgressions until the seed would come. So how long would the law be? Until the seed came. People are still trying to live by the law today. It's crazy. So whenever Jesus comes, he eats Passover with his disciples, the 12. He eats Passover with them, and then he dies, he's resurrected, and 50 days later, on Pentecost, just like Moses gave them the Passover in the flesh, 50 days later he put the laws in, he gave them the law in the flesh. They had to read in ink and stone. The letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. He was the Old Testament. Jesus Christ became the New Testament. He said, this is the New Testament in my blood that was shed for them. He is that sacrifice that everybody was waiting for. And he was saying, look, God's not going to honor you for the Old Testament anymore. This is a New Testament. This is what you're waiting for. Like Moses said, one like unto his brethren would God raise up unto Israel, and they would hear that prophet. And anybody one like Moses would he raise up unto the brethren. And if they didn't hear that prophet, they'd be cut off from the people. This was a sign of Joshua, who came after Moses, or Yeshua, however you want to say it. It's the same name as Jesus Christ, the exact same. Whatever Joshua was named, Jesus was named. But that shows that Moses was not the fulfillment, but they were waiting for a fulfillment. So as Moses gave them the Passover, again, 50 days later, he gave them the law written in ink and in stone. Jesus Christ became the new Passover, saying, look, you're not going to be protected because of the Old Testament anymore. This is the New Testament. I'm the one that was prophesied in the Old Testament. You must hear me. You must believe me. And then 50 days later on Pentecost, or Feast of Weeks, he put the laws of God inside of them, fulfilling what was prophesied, what happened, the shadow of the Old Testament. Now, why were the children of Israel in Egypt for 400 years? Everybody's looking from there. They're looking from the past and then going to Jesus. You should be looking at Jesus and then realizing why the past happened, because it was actually just a foreshadowing of what was going to come with Jesus. So the children of Israel, God didn't talk to any prophets for 400 years. They were in bondage for 400 years. Israel Even in the first century, the Jews believed that Malachi was their last prophet, and it was 400 years before Jesus Christ. That's why it's in the Bible. Malachi is the last one. That's why they put it in the canon like that, because the Jews believed it was their last prophet. And then there was 400 years of silence before Jesus Christ came. And the last thing you have in the Old Testament is Malachi talking about the Messiah coming to his temple. Read the last chapter of Malachi. The Messiah comes to his temple. And then John the Baptist, or Elijah, comes before the great and terrible day of the Lord to make the path straight for the Messiah. And then the first thing you have in the New Testament is John the Baptist. He was in the wilderness until it was time for him to start preaching. When did he start preaching? As I said, go read the last chapter of Malachi. The Messiah would come to his temple. John the Baptist's cue to start preaching was whenever the temple was finished. Herod started building the temple in about 20 BC. It was finished in about 26, 27 AD. And whenever that temple was finished, John knew that that was his cue. He's like, all right, it's time for me to start preaching. The Messiah is among us because the temple is finished. The carrying away into Babylon lasted 70 years. Whenever they got carried away into Babylon, they stopped using the name of God. A whole bunch of stuff changed because God was not honoring them again. They did finally get their tabernacle-type temple after they were brought out of Babylon by Cyrus. But this again is a show of Christ from 1 BC to 70 AD. It's that 70 years. Now, once they did that temple that Cyrus built for them, and they were brought out of the desolations in Babylon, I think it's Haggai that said whenever the temple was built and whenever it became built in greater splendor than Solomon's, then God would shake the heavens and the earth once more. This is what Peter was talking about. He knew this. It was that time that Jesus came because Herod's temple was built in greater splendor than Solomon's ever was. And he said, once more, God will shake the heavens and the earth. Now, Moses did not bring them into the promised land, but Joshua did. Moses died. He wasn't able to see the promised land. Joshua, one like unto him, was raised up unto his brethren. If they didn't hear him, he was cut off. That was Joshua. Yeshua, Yahshua. That was Jesus. Yeshua, Yahshua. That was a show of Jesus. That was after 40 years. Jesus Christ died in 30 AD and destroyed the temple in 70 AD. Whenever the temple in 70 AD was destroyed, after that 40 years of Jesus being gone, after that 40 years, whenever the temple was destroyed, they went up into the promised land, the heavenly Jerusalem, a new Jerusalem that was in heaven. David was king over Jerusalem for 40 years, or king for 40 years anyway, 7 and then 33. But he was king for 40 years. This is Jesus Christ's work on earth was 40 years long. David made the capital Jerusalem. On earth, Jesus Christ came to destroy Jerusalem. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, now that killest the prophets, their house would be left unto them desolate. And there are tons more correlations between what happened in the Old Testament and what Jesus Christ was, and he matches all of them. We might get into more as we go through. Stay tuned for the series. I'm going to start talking about the time of Christ and what everything was.